Hello lovelies, it's Claire here and this is my second video of the day. There is a very short video that's already uploaded, which is me drawing the winner for our 500 subscribers giveaway and also talking about my new Facebook group. So if you haven't already, please check that one out. In this video, we are going to talk about how to prep our fabric before we start sewing with it, and also how to prep cloth pads that we have purchased or made ourselves, as prep is something that is thrown around a lot when people are talking about making cloth pads and buying cloth pads. But it's not, people can get confused about what it means and just how to do it and tell if something's shrunk or finished shrinking. So we're going to talk about that now. So we're going to start with fabric. Now, why we prep wash our fabric is two reasons, really. The first is to clean it, because at the end of the day, it has been made in a factory. It has then travelled by some kind of means to a wholesaler. It's then been stored at the wholesaler and then taken out to a retailer. Then it has either travelled in the post to you or you've picked it up in store, and during that time it's collecting dust, lint, germs, chemicals, who knows what is coming into contact with your fabric. So you want to get anything that could be in there out so you've got as cleaner fabric as can be. The next and the most important one is shrinkage. Now, often people will say, do I really need to do this whole pre-wash shrinking thing? Is it that important? I'm desperate to sew, and I know where you're coming from. I have had it myself where new fabrics arrive and I'm like, oh my God, I need to cut it. I need to make pads. I've got it all in my mind. And then I'm like, uh-oh. Nope, I've got to prep wash this. This is going to take a few washes. It's definitely not going to get me sewing today. But it is truly an important step in the cloth pad making process. So how do we do it, basically? Now, first thing you've got to do is choose if you are bothered by frayed edges of your fabric. Now, when you wash, particularly cottons, they fray. They can get caught up in the washer and the dryer and tangles come out and you have to cut off those strands. Now, if you don't want to have to deal with that, then when your fabric arrives or you get it home, you need to take your fabric to the machine and go along the raw edges with a zigzag stitch to stop that fraying. Now, it's completely up to you whether you do that step or not. I personally don't, because I buy fabric in maybe like a couple of meters and I might have a lot of different patterns to wash, and it just seems like a really long extra step for me to add. So I don't, and I just chop off the fraying, and I only ever lose about 1 centimeter. So it really isn't the end of the world to me. But if you prefer not to deal with the fraying, then don't forget to zigzag stitch the raw edges of your fabric. You do not need to do that with bamboo and hemp fleece that comes in a tubular form, which means it's a round tube with no cut edge. It doesn't lay flat because you've got a tube of the fabric, which is what this is. This will not fray. The most it does is curl over at the ends, and even zigzagging it, I've tried both ways, it doesn't really make any effect. So it's still going to curl up slightly at the ends. So I don't bother. But don't cut your tube of fabric before pre-washing. Otherwise you'll get a lot more curling. What you want to do is leave it in its tube for the pre-washing and shrinking process. And you'll be good to go. The next step is the actual washing part. So you want to wash your fabrics on hot. So I wash mine on 60, and then you want to put them in a hot dryer and dry them. And then you repeat that process until the fabric has stopped shrinking. So how do we know when it has stopped shrinking? There's two main methods you can use for this. The first one I actually have used for ages. I've only recently swapped my method for this. And that is, when you get your fabric at home, you measure it lengthwise and measure it widthwise and make a note of those measurements. Then you put it in your wash, put it in your dry, measure it again afterwards, make a note of those measurements, and so forth until your measurements match the measurements from the time before. Then you know your fabric has stopped shrinking. Now, I think this tip that I'm about to give you came from Nina at Ngozi Sews. I'm not sure if I was chatting with her, she put on her Facebook page, I don't really remember. But what you do is, when your fabric arrives, you cut a 4" by 4" square of each of your fabrics and pop those in the wash and the drying process, and you use those as your control. So you measure them each time and record what they're at. Then when they stop shrinking, then you know your fabric stopped shrinking, which is a lot less work if you have loads of fabric to measure. But one thing with that is, don't be tempted to make your square too small, like do something like 2" by 2", because it is going to shrink. So you need to have enough room for that shrinkage to happen without it just turning into a little ball or curled up piece of fabric. And also, if it's too small, it can end up getting lost in your washing machine or ending up in the lint drawer in your dryer, and then you have to fish it out. So I've found 4" by 4" to be a really good size for this method. So that's how to tell if it has stopped shrinking. Now, different fabrics shrink at different rates, so it really does depend, and it even like varies between manufacturers. I've had some 500 GSM bamboo fleece that has taken 3 washes to prep and shrink, and I've had some from a different manufacturer, different like factory, that has taken 5. So it is really important to do the measuring. Don't leave that stage out, or you do not have a way to tell how much things are shrinking. But as a rough guide, this is what I have found, that bamboo and hemp based fleeces tend to take between 3 and 5 washes to shrink. Flannel, cotton and terry tend to take about 2. They shrink not as much as the fleeces and take less time to stop shrinking. Velours, if you're buying from a small business that dyes the fabric for you, then they've done a lot of the prep washes. So you will most likely find that you can do 1 wash and it will be the same when it comes out as it went in. So in which case you don't need to do any more, but do double check. If you buy undyed velours, then it can take anywhere between 2 to 3 washes for it to stop shrinking. Corduroy tends to take between 2 and 5. It varies greatly depending on the thickness of the cord, what wale it is. So cord can be a bit of a pain taking the maximum of washes. I've actually had one that took 6 before now. So do definitely measure carefully with your corduroy. Zorbs, you do not wash Zorb 1, so don't worry about any kind of prep for that, it's not needed. But Zorbs 2 and 3D do need pre-washing and shrinking, and they tend to take between 2 and 4. And then we come to polyester based fabrics. Now these, because they are fully synthetic, tend not to shrink, or if they do, a very minimal amount. So you're looking at 1 to 2 washes, and they're mostly being washed to get them clean from the things we talked about earlier. But again, make sure you check for yourself, and also check between batches of fabric you buy as well, because it can vary greatly. Last but not least is, I wanted to talk about if you don't have a tumble dryer, because not everyone does. And then some people worry, well, can I not sew my own pads? You know, how am I gonna shrink it, etc. Now, if you're just making for yourself, home use, then all you would do is you would do the process of hot washing in your machine, and then air drying, and then hot washing and air drying until the shrinkage has stopped. But if you plan to give some of those pads away, or you plan to sell and you don't own a dryer, then I would really recommend that you tell people that they need to be dried on call in the dryer or air dried. Or if it's friends and families, at least warn them that if they put them in a hot dryer that they could get some shrinkage, because you would be surprised at how much of the shrinkage actually takes place in the hot dryer, because it is a hotter temperature than a 60 in your washing machine. So it is just something to bear in mind, particularly with the bamboo and hemp fleeces here. They seem to be the most problematic. So if it's not been prepped in a dryer, I wouldn't recommend it, that part of their care routine be to put them in a hot dryer once they're completed. But again, you can do your own tests on this, maybe ask to use a neighbour or family member's dryers and test a couple of your pads and see what happens, as different materials do vary. So next is how to prep your made pads. So you get some in the post and you want to prep them, or you've made some yourself and you want to prep them. The reasons for prepping completed pads and pads you've purchased are completely different to the reasons we prep our fabrics for construction. The main reason for washing, which is basically what your prep is, washing your pads when they arrive, is that pad makers tend to use a mixture of things like fabric pens, fabric glue, some even use basting spray. They will have used their own detergents, which if you have sensitive skin could affect you. So by bringing them into the house and washing them, you are getting rid of any residues of the making process, and then you're good to go. Now, if your cores are Zorb, particularly Zorb 1, because that has not been pre-washed, it does take a good few washes for Zorb to come to its full absorbency. So a tip with that is, if you want it to be really up there in absorbency before you start using it, is just pop it in each time you put a load of washing on in your house. Just add your Zorb pads to it, and then they'll get the extra washes they need, but you won't have to do specific machine washes for them. Another one that people often don't think about, but I have a real interest in textiles and fabrics and how they function and work and things, is cotton toppers. Now, if cotton has not had quite a few washes, if it's a particularly thick cotton, some cottons are smoother cottons, then you can find that the fluid will slide around on them. And some people report it goes straight to the wings, and I'm not a fan of cotton, it's not absorbing quick enough. Before you give up on cotton, do make sure that you've given it a real good go in the washing machine. Get it in there for as many washes as you can, put it in with your home washing, and then try it, because it really does make a huge difference. And cotton top pads tend to get faster wicking the longer you own them. So that's just something else to bear in mind. To do your prep wash on your pads, you don't need to worry about hot washes or hot dryers or anything like that. You just wash them on the temperature you would normally wash your pads, which is probably around a 30. So you put them in the washing machine, wash them on 30, and then dry them how you plan to dry them. Be that air drying, cool dryer, however you plan to do it. Just do your normal routine, because this is not about shrinkage. This is just simply about getting your cores to absorbency and making sure that there's no making residue left in the pads. So I think I have covered everything. If I haven't and I've missed something out, please do comment below and ask me. That's it from me today. Please pop along to my Facebook group and have a look there if you fancy. And if you've not already, please do subscribe, and I will talk to you soon.